Mental Dialogue Black Level presents 3 the Smart Way as we discuss business and finance for the culture, featuring serial entrepreneur William Agnew, trader and investor Michael Suttlar, and hosted by yours truly, mental activist Montoya Smth. Catch us live or subscribe for replays on the Mental Dialogue YouTube channel. What's up, everybody? It's your boy Montoya Smth, aka Black Socrates. Most of you know me from the Mental Dialogue Talk Show. We are starting this new broadcast as I got my man Michael Suttlar, Commodities trading advisor, on for our first 3 the Smart Way. We're looking for one of our other superheroes in action, William Agnew. But this is a pop-up show that's going to be our new style for this 3 the Smart Way as we tackle business and finance for the culture. And so we're just going to do the broadcast with my man Michael, and hopefully we get William in here in a second. But if you will, Michael, again, I'm a cultural advocate, a mental activist, if you will. But if you will, give them a little bit about your background as we get into today's first episode of 3 the Smart Way random pop-up shows. But thank you for being with me, King.
Always, man. You know how it is. For me, I'm a Mississippi-bred former rocket scientist, but don't hold it against me. The Earth is not flat. It's not up for debate. But aside from that, I've taken on a career that has taken me into a high world of finance where we trade in derivatives markets, including futures and options and Forex and all the things that have become very popular. But I've been doing it for almost 20 years now, going from retail to pro, and along the way, finding a heart for education and uplifting our people in the process. And so, of course, I like to talk about all things money, but also there's no such thing as just being able to talk about money in a vacuum. I think that, capital without conscience is not only problematic, but ultimately destructive. And so I like to chat with Montoya and Billy as he comes in so that we can come up with some ideas on how to push forward through all the nonsense of the day. So that's my 3 cents.
Hey, I love it, brother. And so, yeah, man, these again, for anybody out there watching or that ends up seeing this, we just really want to randomly tackle business and finance for the culture from a intelligent and unapologetically Black view, just to give a perspective. And so what we decided to kind of start episode 1 on was something that's happening with Apple. Apple's in the last 6 months has had a big turn of events. And we thought we would say, hey, let's jump on, chop it up, and just see if we can have a smart conversation about some of these issues in this area. And so Earn Your Leisure, everybody knows them, and props to them for being one of the lead dogs in, if you will, getting our culture to have more financially sound conversations. So definitely want to shout them out. And this actual topic comes from just something that they put out recently, just highlighting everything that's happened to Apple over the last 6 months. So I'm going to share those happenings, and then Michael, you just kind of jump in where you fit in on anything that stands out to you. But again, this is something that Earn Your Leisure recently put out, and they said everything that bad that happened to Apple in the last 6 months. On September 2023, they were forced to give up the Lightning port and adopt the USB-C. Also in September 2023, Apple's 4th fiscal quarter marked the longest revenue slowdown in 20 years. Then in October 2023, no new iPad launched for the first time in a decade. It also in October 2023 banned imposed on the new Apple Watch. And then in January of this year, low iPhone sales in China accounted for 20% of Apple's revenue. In February of 2024, Apple canceled its decade-long dream of building a car. They spent over $10 billion before canceling the project. And then just in February, Apple was fined $2 billion by the EU in the Spotify antitrust case. And then in March 2024, Meta, Microsoft, and X joined Epic Games against the Apple App Store fee protest. Also in March of 2024, U.S. Department of Justice sued Apple for illegally monopolizing the smartphone market. That's a lot in 6 months, fella. I got I got my man William Agnew, our serial entrepreneur, joining our first episode of Three the Smart Way. Before I let Michael jump in on the happenings of Apple, if you will, brother, tell them how long you've been in this entrepreneur game, because I basically broke down for anybody that listened to our first broadcast that we're going to tackle business and finance for the culture from an intelligent and unapologetically Black view. What's your role in this thing, Through the Smart Way, if you will, William?
Love it.
Oh man, so I've been in entrepreneur. I left corporation. I feel like plantation, right? I don't know if you want to say corporation or plantation.
They have the same
smart way. You can call it. You can call it
corporation,
that on Through the
man.
Smart Way. That's what we doing. We ain't playing.
They have the same roots. Same roots. Yeah, man.
Exactly. Back in 2008, man. So it's been. I always say 10 years, but it's been over 10 years now. It's been about 15 years. I left. And God, thank God and blessings I've had. I haven't had to go back. They haven't been all sunshine. It's been some rain, definitely, and that's part of the process. But you know what
that's
I'm saying?
how we grow.
I'm still here and I'm still standing. So.
Hey, matter of fact, I'll tell you one step further. You a runaway slave and ain't got caught yet.
Exactly.
Facts.
I'm with it.
That's facts. Yeah,
I'm with it.
I love that analogy.
You matter of fact, you up in Canada living good now. You ain't even got to worry about it.
I love that analogy. I love it.
It's all to the G. Hey, it's all to the G. But yeah, to jump back on this thing, you've already.
How you doing, Mike?
Yeah,
you're doing great now, man. That you here. We in here.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool.
So
cool. I'm sorry I'm late, fellas. Sorry I'm late.
No, you good, brother. Like I said, we told everybody it's gonna be random pop-ups, but that's what Through the Smart Way gonna be. It's gonna be random pop-ups on topics on business and finance. But we were just going through, which y'all had already seen, the slides by Earn Your Leisure. We gave them their props for highlighting what's happened to Apple over the last 6 months. And so, Michael, I was about to start with you. Out of all those things you just heard, what was the thing that stood out to you that you just kind of wanted to give a few, give your 3 cents on, if you will?
Let's see. Out of all the things that I heard that are the most interesting would be the slowdown in China. Because I'm going to tell you, like, even though it's a lot of stuff, I can just tell you from a sort of an investment standpoint, that's a day in the life of somebody who's at the top of their game. And Apple being at the top of not just, the smartphone, but it's more of a consumer electronics, but also a luxury brand type thing. It's not quite the same thing as like an LVMH or, some of the other names that we could throw around in that space. But Apple in and of itself has some branding that basically, like I said, would be tantamount to it being a status symbol, right? And so with it being a status symbol, I'm gonna keep it a buck, man. We forget that war and business are literally one and the same. It's just one is done with tanks and suits, and the other one's done with, one's done with tanks and missiles and all this other stuff, and the other one's done with suits and laws. But Apple, being in business, has a level of competition that they must adhere to at all times. And so, I guess my biggest thing as I'm thinking about this, Apple hasn't really innovated in quite some time. And I was a big Steve Jobs fan, at least of his work. Now, personality and stuff, that be that as it may. Y'all like Elon Musk, so if y'all like Musk, then y'all can keep up with me liking, Steve Jobs. So, but to the point, I honestly think that with China representing, a fifth of their revenue, and we could talk a lot more about China's economy. China's economy since COVID has not been the same. They're still the number one manufacturing, hub in the global hub in the world, but we don't really know how well their economy is growing, because China puts out its own type of brand. It kind of puts out its own numbers, and it's kind of like anything else. It's kind of like a person. If China feels like their numbers don't look good, they're not going to really put that out. So they're only going to put out the good stuff for us to see. But one thing about global markets is you can kind of look at other things upstream and downstream, import and export. Since again, they are a monstrous exporter. You can kind of tell by how much is going, like I said, how many Apple
Let me
phones.
ask you this real quick.
Yeah, go for it.
Like, how does that relate to, in your opinion, everything you're saying? How does it relate to Apple specifically slowing down and losing that share in China? Like, I'm trying to connect the dot as I'm listening to you.
Oh, it's that's quite simple. If they represent 20% of the revenue that Apple gets in, if you think about it, out of every dollar that Apple earns, and it's billions of dollars every quarter, right? 20 cents is not there anymore, is what they're saying.
No, yeah, I get that. Yeah, I'm just trying to connect
Yeah.
what you're saying to what China typically reports. I'm just trying to connect the dots to what happened.
Well, what China typically reports is the same thing as our government reports. Is like how big
ask,
their
how does it connect? I'm trying to connect that thought. If you understand what I'm saying, like connect that thought, highlighting what they typically report. I don't know. I'm missing. I'm being honest. I'm missing how it connects to what's happening with Apple. Do you understand what I'm asking?
Yeah. So what I'm trying to say, if China's economy is actually slowing down, right? So if their economy is if their people are not buying as many things, whether it's Apple products or whatever it is, no matter what it is, if they're slowing down, Apple is going to feel that immediately. And what I was thinking about, most of the times, like for the United States or EU or some other country, they typically are pretty transparent about their reporting of how their economy is doing. And so for companies like Apple, you can kind of get a sense of the slowdown is going to, like, you can look out and say, well, I see what the GDP is. I see what CPI is. I see what producers are pricing. I see what all these indicators are saying. And I can put some truth to that. I can say that there is some truth to what this data says. With China, you can't quite do that.
Let me jump William in here, if you will. So, William, I know you do business in China, one of the few people that has the ability to do so. So, any thoughts to what Mike was highlighting? I guess he's tying it to a potential slowdown of economy with China just based on this example. Now, me being the layman here, I'm the moderator, if you will. Being the layman here, I'm like, well, how does that help Samsung take over per se? But I mean, you probably can connect that dot better than I can.
Well, I think based on the stuff that you sent us and the problems that you're seeing with a lot of corporations that have been making a lot of money over the last 20 crazy amounts of money, I think what you're seeing is a pivot in what the value proposition is for these corporations. I talk about value proposition all the time, and what you see is a transition from, and you see a transition happening in the marketplace, and it's not so much that people aren't seeing the value in Apple like they used to see. Apple has become what is known as a utility now. So it used to be, you got to understand, we're moving through a space where technology, people are perceiving that more as a utility than a luxury. And that changes what the value proposition is, and that changes how corporations think about the offering, right? Because now it's like, you don't have to be so salesy like you used to be, right? And so that whole mindset at the corporate level is changing. And so what you're going to see is that shift from more of a hardware focus and the look and feel of what it looks like to more of a software, AI, technological focus. And I think what's happening is corporations are changing their focus and what they feel the money is going to be in the next 10 to 15 years. And that's a big shift right now. I mean, everybody sees it. You guys see what's going on with AI. You see how just crazy value it brings in terms of creativity, in terms of productivity, in terms of efficiency. And so these corporations are like, they can only focus, as big as they are, as much money as they make, corporations really have to focus on what the next 10 to 15 years they're going to focus on. I saw it when I worked at Intel Corporation. Intel
let me ask you this, William, as you're breaking it down.
Okay.
So, you're applying that to corporations, but in a sense, somehow everything you just said allows Samsung to swing back to the front. I'm still trying to pinpoint it down on that explanation of
competitively, it depends on what you focus on. So it might be Apple just chose to focus on a pivot and change direction, which a lot of times what happens when you do that is you're going to have a fall off because you're reevaluating and resetting what your future focus and model is going to be. So sometimes you got to pull back on what you're doing over here to then put more resources over here, because this is what you're trendsetter. Like the example I was using, like Intel fell victim of this back in 2000. That's the corporation that I left from, right? And so they did not focus on the mobile environment when mobile was coming really big.
Mm-hmm.
And then you guys remember back in like 2007, 2006, Intel was the top of the game in the semiconductor industry. They had the chips that they were huge. And then what happened was they actually hired a CEO who was less technical and he was more business. So he had a business background. He didn't have a technological background. He had a business background. And that was the first time they had hired a guy who wasn't, say, a technical guy. He was more of a business guy. And see, if you understand the characteristics of business guys, they're bean counters. No, not to be, they're being, what's what I call bean counters. Whereas the technological guys, they do what Apple's doing right now, which is they go, look, we might have a down couple of years, but we're getting ready for what's about to happen. So let's go ahead and invest in that and go this direction. So what that looks like on the outside is that looks like they're falling off and the competition is moving up. But a lot of times what's happening is they're reevaluating their strategy. They're pulling back in the money that they used to spend over here, and now they're allocating money for the future, which Intel didn't do, right? And they lost the mobile market. They lost
that makes sense.
And so
let me
what
jump in
happened
on
was
AMD.
Yeah, go ahead. Well, that's when
in.
Taiwan came in and
no, that makes sense. That makes sense. Let me jump in and ask some of the other things. Here's the thing that kind of stood out to me, in addition to maybe what's happening specifically with their iPhone market or whatever, and Samsung, because it was big news when Apple overtook Samsung worldwide, right? So now it's news again when Samsung overtakes Apple. But you also have Apple going through the other things that Earn Your Leisure also pointed out. Mike, you want me to bring you on from your desk now?
Yes, sir. Just checking. Appreciate it.
No problem. Yep, we'll definitely do you like that.
Hey, let's do it.
Cool. All right, super cool. And so, so you also have all these additional things, and there was two things that stood out for me: the antitrust, $2 billion, which is a big number, to the average person or whatever, but these large companies somehow can withstand this and be okay. Right. But a $2 billion antitrust lawsuit from the EU, and so that's one issue I would love to kind of jump into a little bit. But the other thing was them stopping, and I'm pretty sure this is pretty fascinating for you, William, because you love technology so much, that they stopped the actual Apple stopped making the car after they put $10 billion into it. Like they literally just said, you know what, we're going to stop this entire project, even though we spent all these, really almost a decade working on it and putting $10 billion into it. And some of that, I'm assuming, is probably not the only reason, but even the electric car industry is facing a slowdown right now. They were on a certain trajectory, and right now they're currently facing not selling as many as they thought they would, as we thought the future, as we transfer more from gas to electronics. I think the industry surprised to see that slowdown. So I think that slowdown is probably not the final straw in the coffin for Apple to say, you know what, we're not going to go this route or whatever. But the marketplace ain't what they assumed it to be. So I'm pretty sure it played a big role in them finally saying, you know what, we took a shot. Let's nix it. Let's cut our losses. Your thoughts on that, William?
I just think from the car perspective, the cars are very interesting. And I've been looking at Tesla. Obviously, Elon Musk goes there. He just stated, I think a couple of days ago, we are a tech company, right? He made that statement, I think 2 days ago, just to restate, we are a tech company. And I think you really got to take that in consideration. Like the focus is not so much on the hardware. Like I work with Teslas every day, and Tesla's a great example of reducing the cost of production, right? If you even if you think about where they're moving from and where they're moving to, right? You got to understand that the data and the I guess the AI of it, the data of it, the technological software of it, right, is where everybody is putting their focus. So I think what's happening, even with Apple, is they're moving away from the look and feel and more into how are we going to monetize on this software side. And Elon Musk a couple of days just restated that. Like, if you look at a Tesla, what you begin to understand is it's not built very well. And the cost of the build is very cheap.
Exactly.
It's a very inexpensively built vehicle. And people don't realize that, because when you sit in it, right, what you're buying into are the bells and whistles of the technology. But when you get really close and you look at the fabrication and the production of that vehicle, on top of the fact that they only offer you 5 colors. So you got to ask yourself, well, why are they doing this? Why are they pulling back on the look, the feel? Like, the Cybertruck isn't a very sexy vehicle. I don't know if you guys have seen it up close. It doesn't look very nice to me, right? But when you get close to it, it's the awe of the technological capabilities. When you sit in it, you gotta, technologically it is top notch, right? But the fabrication of it is not. And so I think what you're just seeing is you're seeing this transition in strategy where guys are going, look, maybe Apple was competing on the look and feel side, because when you look at their car, it was very sexy, right? It was the look and feel was very, and maybe they just had the wrong focus in terms of what the money play is going to be, in terms of how they're going to make the money. So Tesla is definitely further ahead on the technology side of that than Apple would be. And maybe Apple just didn't see that they would be competitive enough on that side, and they were putting more of their money into the look and feel. And what they realized is look and feel is not the play for the next 10 years. It's really about reducing the cost, right? And again, if you look at a Tesla, it's very inexpensive. It's a very inexpensively built vehicle. It is not expensive, right? And when you take all of the stuff out of electrical vehicles, you realize that the cost to build this is a lot cheaper than people perceive it to be. And that's what technology allows you to do. So I think from a business perspective and knowing how corporations actually make decisions, it was a money decision. It was a money decision based on what they had invested in and thought that people would buy into versus where they feel like, the value proposition that I talk about all the time is going. And it's more on the tech side, right? Like Elon said, we're a technical company. We are a technology company, right? I'll give you one example. Let me give you this example real quick. You guys know about the Tesla insurance, right? How Tesla insurance works, right? So Tesla insurance is based on your drive score, right? So this is how technology allows you to play. And this is why the focus is going more to the software side than even the hardware side, which is why you see a shift, right? So now Tesla can play in the insurance space, right? Simply because now they can monitor how you drive. So if you think about the dynamics of that, they can reward you, incentivize you based on your behavior, and that's a technology play. So if you drive well and you don't run through stop signs and you don't tailgate people and you don't speed and you don't blow through school zones, right? Then the technology is tracking you, it's grading you, and what that allows Tesla to do is offer you a cheaper premium on your insurance. So you got to think, okay, that's a technology play that allows me to monetize in a way that people don't even realize at this moment. So the focus is going away from Apple standing on stage and showing you the latest and greatest and the newest. They're not doing that anymore, right? Because that's not where the money is now. It's not in the presentation anymore. It's kind of hidden. It's hidden in the technology. So regular Joes like us, normal Joe, not regular Joe, not we're not regular, but the Joe Pub, right? They don't even see the monetization of what the corporation now is playing in terms of their ability to track your behavior, incentivize you for good behavior, right? Right? And monetize that on the software side, which is why a guy like Elon Musk can offer you a less attractive vehicle. He can give you less options on that side because now you realize that this is a utility that I need. It's not a luxury anymore. It's getting to the place where the technology is now almost a utility where you need it. So what the corporation is going to do is cut back on how they used to sell you, which is what the look and the feel. I can give you 5 options now. I can Chipotle you, right?
Right. Let me jump in right there, William, if you don't mind.
Right.
I love that example. Yeah,
right.
Like people don't realize Chipotle evaluates at $6 billion,
right?
And they only sell you 3 items on their menu.
Right.
It's literally you can get a bowl of wrap,
bowl of burritos, sir. Bowl of burritos.
That's it.
What do you want? Yeah.
Yep.
$6 billion they evaluate.
Yeah,
Yeah, I got knocked off, if you will. So glad y'all kept the thing running, if you will. Michael, just your thoughts on what you just heard William say, and then I want to jump into the Kanye thing and get off this thing because we want to keep these short and keep them moving, if you will. But just your thoughts to William fully breaking down his perspective on because I missed some of it, but I can make assumption because I know William very well.
Yeah,
that he was giving his viewpoint of what also probably evaluated in Apple, saying, you know what, we don't even want to compete because Elon and them are moving this way, in addition to, as I highlighted, the overall industry kind of slowing down, probably play a role, but I'm pretty sure William was breaking down some strategy that also probably played a role in William and in Apple and them saying, you know what, we're going to just send that $10 billion down the drain. Your thoughts on what you just heard William say real quick, just something short, and then I want to jump into the Kanye thing and get off this thing.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, I would say that, I think William's exactly right about how software and technology itself is a deflator. What it does is it take prices, like when a technology first comes out, it's very expensive. Then over time, it becomes very cheap. Like if you think about the first cell phones, first computers, first cars, relative to what, the first one came out, it was expensive. And slowly over time, it deflates. So what William is saying is that Elon and Tesla are using that with software in mind, with subscriptions in mind, with the utility of the car being all interlaced, and not necessarily what people want, because I will tell you, he's done an extremely good job. I don't know how, but he's done an extremely good job of marketing. And like I say, I have young traders that are in here now that are learning from me. One of the things they're like, I can't wait till we make this much money, and I'm going to buy a Tesla. And I was like, Tesla? and they were looking at me incredulous, like, what, like, why don't you want a Tesla? I was like, brother, I have been in the Porsche Taycan, I have been in Audi. I say, when you sit in these other vehicles, you tell me about them. But again, to this point, they were like, nah, I think I like a Tesla. So these people at like where they are, and there's a ton, and so there's a huge market for that. I have been just amazed at it. So to his point, Apple and these companies, what I started off with, they're in competition. They're at war. Like, honestly, business is war. And the best part about it, of course, all war is deception. Apple is no fool. And even though to us, $10 billion may seem like a lot of money, I told you before, Apple sits on about 150 to 170 billion dollars in just cash. That's not assets. So they lost a rack.
And Michael, you as an investor, Michael, what you know is one of the best skills to have in the investment space
cut your losses.
is knowing when to cut your losses.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Because you can hang on to it.
Investor.
Yes.
And as a trader, like I say, in a much shorter term, I teach my guys, you know where your level is. When it hits, don't think it's automatic. You're out. You're out and you're on to the next thing. And so Apple, to be competitive, like William said, the landscape has shifted. Apple's not dumb. They know that Samsung's over here. They know that Google's here. They know that, Tesla's over here. So they're seeing the landscape of their quote unquote enemies. They won't openly say this is, a battlefield, but it is. It's for the supremacy of the cash flows at a global level. It's a supremacy for power at a global level. Because like I say, if you really want to, this would be another episode for us, but who's the real power behind governments? I can tell you from having worked in, military industrial, Apple has a big key place, as does some of the other stuff that Elon Musk is doing, as does some of the things that the big companies, like if you look at the top guys with the
absolutely.
Maybe
let me transition with that or whatever. That's a good point. Like I said, we could probably jump into that because I always highlight, especially our capitalistic governments, right? Those that have some sentiments of
what
capitalism.
else is there today?
Right. That's where I was about to go. That's where I was about to go. I was about to go that despite what other governments may be, they're all playing in this capitalistic play. Period. When it comes to the economy, and at the end of the day,
same thing William was talking about.
And
you're drawn to it because you have no choice.
Right. And at the end of the day, governments were designed to be ruled by the wealth class.
Wealthy.
So people shouldn't be surprised by that. People shouldn't be, in a sense, surprised or alarmed. Obviously, when you get into antitrust, you start talking about, in a sense, drowning the market out. How fair is that? Are you allowing fair play? Are you setting and controlling prices? All of those things are things that necessarily have to be concerned with, or whatever. And so, with the advent of social media and technology, that becomes even more difficult to
technology
control.
itself. Yeah.
Yep. To control. And so that's even for African Americans specifically going into business, even being successful. That's one of the places that for these big companies like the Apples, like the Elon Musk, Tesla and all of those, for those big companies, they have a jump on everybody, not just us as African Americans.
Yeah, no, everybody.
From the technology standpoint of monopolizing it in a way that even companies with big names, as they start to bring in more technology, they're behind the game, and we've considered them big players prior to technology becoming the great equalizer that it has become.
One last thing William said. One last thing William said too that has to be of note is that how far these companies are looking down the road, and it is 10 to 15 years at a minimum. I was listening to Facebook's earnings, and one of the things that Mark Zuckerberg himself said on the earnings call was that, even though AI is exciting and we see the what it could be, the influence of it, he doesn't think it's going to be realized anytime soon at the level which investors are really looking. And so they're saying, hey, we're committed to spending billions over the next decade to get it there. So back to what William was saying about Elon and saying, hey, Tesla is a tech company. All these tech companies are taking a longer approach to digging out this. It's almost like the gold rush again. They see AI as being another gold rush. They're willing to go west. They're willing to spend capital resources, human resources, legal resources. And of course, that's going to mean fighting antitrust and all these other things. It's just part of the game. And that's why I say when people say, the rap is kind of like the six worst things to happen to Apple, I was like, most of those 5 of those things really don't matter. It's just part of the game. I go, Apple's doing pretty good. I'm like, I'll keep it. That's not.
Hey, I was gonna say you're still invested in it, right? Yeah, exactly.
That's not a recommendation. Again, I can't. But you
can't do that. You can't do that. I can do that. Hey, with that said, man, I just wanted to touch on this because it just so happened to pop up. I guess Kanye was on a certain broadcast or whatever, just kind of ranting about what happened to him. And on the audio show, I'll play these things and we'll react to it, but I don't want to get in trouble for copyright or anything like that. So just kind of generally talking about it. He was just highlighting that. When he got to 140 mil, he thought that was inside of JP Morgan. He thought that was enough to let him go talk to the actual guy that owned the bank, I guess, right? Or whatever. So he was always trying to have these conversations. And unfortunately, he ended up, after this blow up with some of his quote unquote anti-Semitic statements that he was making a year ago. JP Morgan said, we don't even want your money. Here's your 140 million. And they unbanked him. I never even heard the term, never even seen it happen. But at one point prior to that, he thought that his 140 million would give him enough leverage to go talk to the guy that owned the bank. And eventually his own comments, his own complaints, he actually got kicked out really kind of prior to that because he was complaining because he couldn't talk to the owner. He thought his 140 million was enough leverage to have that conversation. And even he found out, as he said, he called himself a multi-billionaire at the time, there's still levels to this. I'll let either of y'all kind of jump into that, just that perspective of, I would say, even his own delusion to thinking, hey, my 140 million gives me a play to go at the top. Well, 140 million ain't enough to play at the top. I don't know. I
got a story. You can start how you want to. I got a story that goes right along with this. That Kanye was me at one point.
Yeah, jump in. I knew that. That's why I wanted to pick this story. I knew that. I picked it because I know where you're going. Go ahead, brother.
So this takes me way, way back to like when I first started my fund, because you had to understand, I went from a guy playing with a few hundreds of dollars to tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars. Right. And then again, we were at the time edging onto that like 7-figure point. And so I've been rocking with the same broker for that entire time. Like it had been probably 7-8 years. Like they had seen me grow. Now I have, instead of me talking to the little chat bots, I had like an institutional relationship manager. And so I'm feeling it. I got my legal paperwork, and then we had this trade. I still remember the trade exactly, but I won't tell too much of the details. But we were down bad in a bad way because I executed the trade, didn't get what I thought was my proper due. Part of it was me, part of it was just like you don't know the laws of the jungle and trading, which is what I tell people. And so I'm coming in complaining to my institution relationship manager, who, by the way, is Japanese, and he's very polite, and it's like I'm like, yeah. And so the more polite he is, I'm getting down on him. Like, I want to talk to so and so. I want to talk to so and so. And he was trying to tell me, like, back off, Michael-san, back off. He was saying it as nice as he could. Bro, I craft a letter to the broker, and it's like, hey, I've done this, and I've made you this much money in commissions. Like, I done the calculations because I'm still in engineer mode, but I'm indignant at this point in time. Send the letter over. By the end of the day, they sent me back a draft letter. I'm like, yeah, now this is what I'm talking about. Termination of your broker agreement with us. Get the out of here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm like, what just happened? I gotta because I have no other brokers, I have no other relationships, and my clients now, they're just, again, we unbanked. I'm running a fund, and we have nowhere to trade. We have no venue, and it takes months to set up these things. So of course, it took me almost a year to get back right.
Wow.
And they wouldn't take me, and I had to go ship out. So it was telling me that even though my story to me was a success story, going from 3 to almost 7 figures at the time,
right?
I'm thinking that's something. It took, and that experience plus another one took me to realize that what my account size was, this broker was making monthly in fees.
Mm-hmm.
So that little $60,000-$70,000 in fees that they were getting from me was it was a drop of water in the Pacific Ocean type thing.
Wow.
And Kanye that's where he was. And you can't think of it because it's a lot of money to you. You would think $140 million is a lot of money to you. But JP Morgan has $3 trillion in assets.
Right.
300 billion in shareholder. What is 100? That's fees.
Right.
That's bonuses that they pay out. You know what I mean? That's no money.
Hey, I can't remember the number now, but Bank of America always puts out, or somebody always, I don't know whoever, I'm pretty sure Bank of America doesn't put it out, but somebody follows it and puts out how much they collect in overdraft fees. It's more than Kanye had in the bank. I know that.
Yeah.
Overdraft fees alone.
Yeah. $2 to $3 billion in overdraft fees alone go to the bank every year.
Yeah, William, your thoughts on kind of the Kanye stuff? Just your perspective.
I just think it shows, again, if you're in touch with, I always talk about value proposition because it's all value. It's like, how much are you valued? And that's what Mike is going to. It's like the value is always changing, and it's perception, it's perspective, right? It's contrast. And so, we negotiate that. We call it leverage, right?
Yes.
We do that every day. Like, we do that at all levels, right? That's how you validate your worth a lot of times, is your leverage based on the value, right? And so Mike tried to leverage, but he found out quickly, right? He didn't have the leverage, right? And that's what negotiation. And that's what negotiations is. And it's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. That's what you should be doing. That's what people need to understand. Because if you don't know, you need to figure out what that is. And that's what Kanye did. Now, with that being said, we're moving into a more technological space where you have what they call leveling of the playing field. So now introduce different options. What Mike didn't have these options back in the day. So Mike couldn't have gone to his options were limited in terms of who he could bank with. But you guys hear this all the time in the news. But what is Russia always upset about, right? Yep. They're always upset with the United States because they weaponize what? The banking system.
System, yeah.
That's what they weaponize. So Russia's always like, well, we're gonna find another way. And now you got this crypto thing coming on, and that's that's a big thing. That's a transition. So we're always transitioning, and the value proposition is always changing. What did Kanye do? Ultimately, he said, I'm gonna take my money and I'm gonna go to Japan, I guess, or wherever he is. You know what I'm saying? So It's part of the game. It's part of the process, and you should always be evaluating your value based on. So Michael's changed, right? Great example. He went from 10, he went to 100, he went to higher, right? His value changed. So what he needed to do was go out and test his value against the market and see where he stood, and see what his options were, who he needed to work with, who he needed to align with, which companies he wanted to work with.
And
all
learn
of that
how to
stuff.
communicate it correctly. That was the other part of it. Learning how to speak the language.
Let's highlight that what you're saying right now, Michael. And I want to talk about even Kanye getting unbanked, because we had did a show on the Mental Dialogue show about what happened with Kanye. You might have been on that show if I believe recall. I don't know if you were or not, but either way, that's another concept when you start talking about business and war and all the different tools and things that can use beyond technology, just the communication. Because I remember one of the callers, one of our regular callers called in, and he was so upset. He was like, when have you ever seen someone unbanked? They don't even want your money. And at the time we were talking about, in a sense, how the Jewish community, can, if you will kind of circle the wagon and say, well, if you talk about us, we'll even unbank you at 140 million, which sounds unheard of. And it literally, to a degree, at least publicly, it is unheard of. It may have happened privately. We didn't know what happened to you, Michael. It may have done it plenty of times privately, but Kanye being a public figure, it obviously made the news.
It takes his leverage away.
Yep. And I have a piece in my, I think you've already read the piece in my book where I talk about Kanye and Kyrie, and even just for our culture, as frustrating as it can be seen that in a sense they circle the wagons that way, instead of saying it from a look at what they did to Kanye, a black man, I've challenged the perspective to say, when you culturally protect yourself and you have the leverage, that's how you play. And I would say the lesson learned is to circle the wagon and understand how to do that versus complain about what happened to this one particular, I'll say, whiny billionaire in that situation.
You're right.
Again, it's not about being against or for Kanye, but I'm just highlighting that we got caught up in the minutia versus realizing culturally there are ways to stand up similarly. And it's really just tying in with your tribe. And I want to highlight that even that tribe ends up being simply the banking tribe within the Jewish community. Like we'll get advocated as though, look at what all the Jews do. And those same banking Jewish people will do it to other Jews in the event that a negotiation goes wrong and isn't leveraged correctly. And so I'm highlighting. Go ahead, William. Please jump in.
No, I was gonna say you're so on right now because it has less to do with the amount of debt instruments you hold, right? Which is money, right? Currency. It has more to do with the tribe that you actually represent, and we see that differentiation all the time, right? Some people have more, more leverage because of who they are, right, and who they're affiliated with, and it's not about how much they actually have. And a lot of these groups, they sustain that by doing what they do. Kyrie's a prime example. He didn't make the USA team, right, this time. We all know why he didn't, right? He deserves to, based on his performance, right? But we all know why he wasn't selected, right? And that's part of the tribe. That has nothing to do with anything else but who he's decided to align with and affiliate himself with, and where he chooses to stand on his politics, his beliefs, and whatever that is. So sometimes it's more than just, I tell people all the time, it's more than just how much money you make, bro. It's not about what you worth in terms of what society owes you in regards to debt, right? What it is it's everything. It's everything encompassing. It's network, it's affiliation, it's messaging, it's tone, it's tonality, it's
that's a dope way to look at it too, because that's why that's a dope way, because actually, if you have a lot of money but you represent, again, a tribe, if you will, that's not lauded, that's not in, you're going to be treated with hostility. You're going to be treated, they don't want to see you affiliated.
100%.
And again, I almost go back to NFL owners on that one too. So
and I would love to highlight what we're talking about, just another context and perspective. And this is what, in my opinion, makes us three the smart way, because we're willing to have these conversations from our unapologetic view. I would like to highlight that you should have the understanding that the affiliation may bring this. So So what happens is we always love to use the term standing on business, right?
Right.
So what happens is you can stand wherever you like. You can stand next to whoever you want.
Exactly.
But you should also understand the consequence and the risk that come with it versus saying, why did this happen to me?
Right.
That's where I think sometimes to a degree we get lost on how the game is played. And I say, I'm not blaming, I'm talking about, I understand the psychology of our history for why we can look at a Kyrie situation or a Kanye situation and says, yeah, this is why this ain't right. And I'm like, get out of right and wrong, understand how it's happening, and learn to play the same way. And so, yes, you can stand, to y'all point, by whoever you like, but standing on it is, oh yeah, I know this come with it.
Right.
And if you know that in my opinion, if you know that's what comes with it, in my opinion, then you make better decisions on whether you want to stand in a group that's going to be isolated or not. I'm not telling people where they should stand or not.
Right.
But if you're going to stand here and then turn around and say, why me? Then I don't know that you made the decision to even associate correctly. Does that make sense? Where I'm going, like your decision of who you're going to stand by and what your I'm saying tribe within a tribe. Like I hate the blanket of Jews, blacks, whites, like doing a whole blanket, because everything is tribes within tribes.
Right.
And when you understand that, then you can associate with a tribe and you can stand on business if you know that going in. But to say, I'm over here, and then why are you doing to me, that's where we lose, in my opinion, some leverage or some understanding of what we're looking at. And we get caught up in, to your point earlier, and we can go ahead and start ending this broadcast, but we get caught up in what's right or wrong. Or Michael, when you highlighted, you like Steve Jobs versus some people like Elon Musk. When it comes to this game of business and finance and the war that you suggest, it ain't even about who you like or not. It's about the value proposition that William constantly talks about and why he's been a successful runaway slave.
Exactly.
15 years, because he's always understood, if I'm not I can talk to whoever I want. It's part of the reason why he's one of the few black men that has a Chinese passport. You can't even get them joints.
Right.
Because he's always understood, if I bring value, I can talk and get in different rooms than whoever. And that's less about the race than anything else. And so definitely wanted to highlight that. If y'all will give me a closing 1 minute thought so we can close out our first episode. And and everybody that's watching this, apologize for our first technical difficulty. I got knocked out, my computer locked up. So when I came back on, I'm like, is the broadcast still going? I shut the whole thing down. So
I saw you do that number. I was like, he in trouble.
My computer locked up. It's only the second time it's ever happened, man. But anyway, give us a final thought. Let's keep it short and let's end our first episode of 3 the Smart Way. Glad to do this. Can't wait to do it again, brothers.
Well, I'll say, I've always, I think. Go ahead, Michael. You go ahead. Let me get my thoughts together. Go ahead.
I was gonna do it this way. So looking at the Apple, when we were talking about Apple, we have to understand that how we perceive a situation has to be within the context of what that thing is. And it's kind of like you can look at it from a bunch of different angles, like you said, but if you come at it straight on saying, oh, well, that's bad, just like you said, almost with that right or wrong, or as you perceive it from, you're treating Apple just like it's you're missing out on the opportunity to learn, to grow, that sort of thing. And the other part to it, like I said, is one of how we perceive, but also I think in business, the best thing I've learned is how to move and how to communicate. I've always had very strong opinions. I mean, again, why get in the business if you don't, you know what I mean? But learning how to move with and without your ego, because you need some for both. I think that's the Kanye lesson, because like I say, there's parts of Kanye I don't like. There's parts of Kanye, but if we look at Kanye as a whole, he is such a learning situation for all of us that we can kind of keep close to heart. And it's, again, like to William said, I can't say enough about that whole value proposition.
Mhm.
Just hearing you say that, William, has changed my perspective of how I move, how I think. So,
Right.
hats off. So,
all
Thank
right,
you.
William,
I
if you
appreciate
will,
it.
give us a 1 minute close, man, for our first episode of
Yeah.
3 the Smart Way. Again, glad to have you Kings on.
I think as a community, we just got to realize we're 13 to 15% of the whole. And so that's a problem in itself because the leverage that we talk about is limited in terms of how much we can do. And even when we get traction, that's easily disrupted because we're only 13 to 15%. So we got to recognize that, number one. If you look at the countries or the places that really thrive with a minority group, they have an ally a lot of times that's bigger, that's more supportive. And in the United States, for our people, we don't really have that ally external to our 13 to 15% that we can say, hey, support our initiatives as a large group to use that leverage. So I think that's a problem. So with that, we have to be more tactical. And the way that I've always approached it is the only way I feel like is I can institute my value system onto my children. And I can say, look, and this is how it flipped for me in terms of don't count the money, right? Because the money is just what I call a debt instrument. And what that money is, it just says that if I got $100,000 in my bank, that means there's $100,000 worth of stuff out here that belongs to me. It's not about the money. What I'm saying is now society owes me $100,000, right? And so what I have to understand is when I'm born, and I tell my daughter this, when you're born, society owes you nothing because you have no debt instrument. So literally, you own nothing out here and society owes you nothing. Now, what value are you going to create for yourself that you can then put in the system, right? And have that system give you the ability to have society owe you something.
Ooh,
yeah,
I love
Because you got to exchange,
that's dope.
that. And so
I
if
love
you
it,
start
man.
thinking, like that, not about the money, let's develop the skill set that relates to the environment, that's supportive of the environment. So then I have the value by which to exchange and get some debt owed to me, right?
Oh man, that's a great
I was just gonna
that's a
say,
great close. That's a great
yeah,
close to our first episode. And I already know what I want to talk about for the next one. So we'll find some time for episode 2.
Good.
Again, thank y'all for the first one. I'm gonna
No
cut this
doubt.
thing up and let's try to get it out to our friends and just see organically grow 3 the Smart Way. This has been again our first episode. Shout out to these 2 kings, brilliant kings. They've mastered in a sense their islands, and we're just bringing it to bring context to all of you that listen. So see y'all next time. Holla at y'all. 3 the Smart Way is out.
Later.
Hey.
Later.
That's dope.
For the culture. Let me take y'all.